Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Annette. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to see you here.
I wouldn't want to leave you alone tonight. It's a great night.
It's great. It looks like we have people still logging on. Do you think we should go ahead and start?
I think so. Let's give out a little intro. Takes a little bit here.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Um, Welcome to our last Pecha Picchu night for 2020. This is Pecha Picchu Santa Fe. My name is Anthony Guida. I'm an architect and the Director of Sustainability for AOS Architects here in Santa Fe. I'm also the board president for Friends of Architecture Santa Fe, a multidisciplinary alliance that fosters constructive dialogues about design in the built environment. Friends is home to the Pecha Picchu Santa Fe program. This evening, I am joined by my brilliant friend, designer Annette Proposteri, our Pecha Picchu program lead and vice president of Friends of Architecture Santa Fe. By day, Annette runs her own brand design practice. It's called Six Blooms. She asks soul-searching questions. I've been on the receiving end of that, offering practical advice and creating stunning communication touchpoints. We look good at Friends of Architecture and particularly at Pecha Santa Fe because Annette touched all of this stuff. Annette's just frozen.
Sorry, there was a glitch there. So thank you, Anthony. I think I caught most of your words. They were very kind. But honestly, Pechakucha doesn't happen because we have beautiful posters or good email campaigns. If I may, I would like to draw the curtain back and ask our PK team to please turn on their cameras and introduce themselves to our audience.
Hi, my name is Carlos. I am a urban planner in Santa Fe. Um, yeah, I'll pass it off to Daisy.
Wait, Carlos.
Oh,
So here's how we're going to play this game. So I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daisy Dominguez. I'm an educator in public schools. Oh, who is someone? Sorry, I am having volume issues. So I'm an educator in public schools, and I just love being a part of this team, this volunteer team that makes PK happen. It's one of the greatest joys I experience now, especially in this time where we're all remote and in our own little worlds. But so on the day of events, I help with the technical setup along with the rest of the team. And I also work with all the presenters to help set up their presentations and to make them look fine and dandy for you all. Thanks, everyone.
So Carlos, let's get you back up on how we're going to play the game. So you say your name, what you do by day, what you do on our team, and one word to describe your PK experience.
sure. So, like I said, my name is Carlos. I'm an urban planner. During the day, I am an urban planner with the city. And then for PK, I am helping with support and helping to kind of manage where PK is going and might take over with working on PK lead stuff in the future. I think a word that I think about for PK is intersecting, an intersection between a lot of different groups and ideas and stories and people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
Hi, I'm Dave Ritzman. I'm the Director of Technology here at Rio Grande School. I help with the technical aspects of PK here in Santa Fe. And my word to describe PK is thought-provoking.
Daisy, do you want to share your word?
Yes, my word is connectedness.
Thank you. And we have a special guest tonight. the founder of PK Santa Fe. Linda, are you on?
I'm here. I can't get my video to start for whatever reason.
Oh, I think Dave has to make you into a co-host. Hang on.
Okay.
I think Linda's not alone.
I'm not alone. We've got ghosts.
I think we may have some other disembodied voices tonight.
Should be good now, Linda.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Linda Pack, and I did not found this chapter. I mean, that's, or I didn't hear what you exactly said in that, but anyways, I'm so happy to be a part of this team, of course, and though not currently since this little guy, but I'm an architect here in Santa Fe with Hoops and Associates, and my word would be reflexive.
Thank you so much. This amazing team is all about dedication. For our last PK event, which is in July, Linda worked right up to when she had to go into labor. And PK happens every single time because of all of these talents. So thank you guys for gifting your time and talent. And, I think all of us do this because we love sharing. We love creating space so that other people can come share their stories to inspire other people. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Dave and Carlos. Each of you, thanks for your contributions. I have said before, and I've said to this audience before, that I've seen many PK events over the years, and particularly in Los Angeles, and none of them are as polished as what we've seen here in Santa Fe, and it's all because of this team.
So the truth is that actually there's more people involved running the PK than just our main core team. Daisy, will you share the volunteers that you oversee?
I'd love to. So big thanks to Max Nutra and Michael Golino. They've been our wonderful MCs in the past. Simon de Aguero, he built this fantastic textile installation for when we were hosting the in-person events at Violet Crown. Absolutely stunning. Thank you so much, Simon. Thomas McBee for running sound when Dave has not been able to make it. We appreciate that. And Dan Reeves, Chico Goller, and Jeanette Dominguez. Thank you all so much for ushering our events. You're the best. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. So, Anthony, it's almost 6:10.
Okay.
So I think our team's returning to their station. I think we're ready to get going on the show.
All right. Volume 8 goes. Okay, to the audience tonight, just a few ground rules up front. We're running this PK event a little differently than before. We've been experimenting with kind of interaction during the PK stuff online, and tonight that continues. Tonight, after each presentation, we'll be pulling in the presenter to answer questions that you might have. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Given the time limitation, please be sure to keep your question short and concise. Dave and Carlos will be monitoring this queue and will nudge you to turn on your mic so you can ask your question directly to the presenter. You can also type in your kudos or your questions to the presenters in the Q&A chat box. All presenters tonight are monitoring the chat box and will do their best to answer written questions and comments. So we encourage both. Put your comments in the Q&A, but if you have a question you'd like to ask in person, we really like that. Go ahead and raise your hand when we're done with the presentation, and we'll get you queued up. So Annette, Ghost. Why are we doing Ghost?
Anthony?
Yes. Hey.
I think there's a ghost in the machine for sure. All right. So as a child, I was terrified of ghosts. Like even images of skulls and bones like would send chills down my spine. In my Thai and Chinese culture, spirits and ghosts are real. They are to be honored and appeased with offerings of feasts and prayers. It was a cultural shock moment to come to America and see people parade around Halloween dressed up as ghosts. And then to also discover that ghosts for Americans can be as sexy as Patrick Swayze, or like friendly like Casper, or super annoying and obnoxious like those in Ghostbusters. So all of these are just really a moment for me to expand my understanding of what ghosts could be.
So did Patrick Swayze cure your fear of ghosts?
Yes and no. I am no longer afraid of those, like the version of the haunted house types of ghosts, but I'm still haunted by different kinds of ghosts. One that can't easily be appeased by feasts and prayers.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's kind of complicated and complex. And that's why tonight I'm super grateful that the theme is on this topic, because I was looking for some friends to help articulate the phantom that seemed to linger and drain our collective psyche and mind, right? So we put out a call for this theme. We ask, what are the things that haunt us? How has it directed you to the path that you're on? How have you reconciled, rejected, or released the ghost in your life? And tonight's presenter, still there?
We're still here.
Okay. Even if all of them cannot be released, rejected, or reconciled yet. So I would love to introduce our first presenter. Daisy, will you cue up his opening slide? So this is Rich Frischman, who's joining us from Seattle tonight. Daisy discovered him because he was selected first place in the curators category at the Review Santa Fe, which is an annual photo festival hosted by Center, another nonprofit here, Anthony, that support photographers who are working on social and environmental issues. His work can be seen across museums across the United States. Tonight, Rich will be sharing with us images from his latest collection, Ghosts of Segregation, where he captures the evidence of America's unsettling past in the vernacular landscape. Our built environment, said Rich, is society's autobiography writ large.
Wow. This is incredible. And I think we're going to have some heavy presentations tonight. So let's get on with the haunting.
Okay.
Walking through New Orleans' French Quarter, you may pass this enigmatic sign directly across from the Napoleon House. Change. This truncated sign is the last vestige of the St. Louis Hotel slave exchange. Through these doors, thousands of people passed into a life of bondage. All human landscape has cultural significance, because we never think about how our built environment reveals our collective priorities, predilections, and prejudices. It is a more honest representation of our nature than anything we might intentionally present. On September 15th, 1963, 5 young girls, 2 of them sisters, gathered in the basement of the 16th Street Baptist Church, happily chatting about the first days of their new school year. A bomb exploded just before 11 o'clock, killing 4 of the little girls and blinding the 5th. The ghosts of segregation haunt us because they are so very much alive today. The Mount Pleasant Baptist Church was one of 3 Black congregations in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana, that were firebombed in April of 2019. During the era of Jim Crow, children of color in the rural South had few educational opportunities. Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears, teamed up with Booker T. Washington to begin building schools across the South to alleviate this need. Over 30 years, ending in 1947, Rosenwald helped build 5,000 schools and educate a third of the Black children in the rural South. Today, fewer than 60 buildings remain. This curious partition in Gonzales, Texas, in Templin's Saloon, is a segregation wall. It was built around 1906, and it was demolished when the saloon was remodeled in 2017. During World War II, Americans of Japanese descent on the west coast of the United States were forced into internment camps hastily built in the remote inland areas of the West. This is a family's living quarters at the Minidoka internment camp in Idaho. The small resort town of Idlewild, Michigan, was known as the Black Eden. From 1912 through the mid-1960s, it was one of the few resort areas where African Americans were welcome. At its height in the 50s and 60s, African Americans traveled from across the Midwest each summer to visit its 2,700 acres of lakes and wilderness. The ghosts of segregation hide in plain sight behind a veil of banality. That window on the right is not a drive-up. It is the colored window. If you were Black, you waited here until all white customers had been taken care of. Down a long, steep alley behind the Tylertown movie theater, you would find this. It's the entrance to a colored restroom. Even the most basic human needs were opportunities to remind people of color of their place in white society. For seeking to use this whites-only bathroom in a Standard Oil gas station in Tuskegee, Alabama, Sammy Young, a 21-year-old student at nearby Tuskegee Institute, was shot and killed by the station attendant. Years after the end of Jim Crow segregation, many architectural vestiges remain. This curious palimpsest of bricks covers the entrance for colored people at the Sanger Theater in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. While white theater goers entered under neon lights on Yazoo Street at the Paramount Theater, people of color had to purchase their tickets in the alley around back and trudge up these stairs to the segregated sections of the upper and lower balcony. The enigmatic door atop the stairway on the south side of the Texan Theater, long locked and largely overlooked, is another colored entrance, a reminder to everyone who walked up it of white supremacy. Racism and the architectural evidence of racism is not limited to the states of the former Confederacy. This is a colored entrance at the Moore Theater in Seattle. In the summer of 1961, 329 Freedom Riders were arrested in Jackson for attempting to integrate public transportation facilities, such as this Greyhound station, They were sent to prison, but their protest worked. In September of 61, the federal government mandated that segregation in interstate transportation must end. Shortly after midnight on June 12, 1963, Medgar Evers, the first Mississippi State Field Secretary for the NAACP, pulled into his driveway in Jackson, Mississippi. When he exited his car carrying a box of T-shirts that said, "Jim Crow must go," he was shot by an assassin. In 1955, Mamie Till put her 14-year-old son, Emmett, on a train from Chicago to spend the summer visiting cousins in the Mississippi Delta. She never saw him alive again. He was lynched for whistling, and his body dumped from this bridge into the muddy waters of Black Bayou. On March 7, 1965, some 600 marchers protesting voter suppression headed east out of Selma, Alabama toward the state capital of Montgomery. They only got as far as the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Voter suppression is just one more ghost of segregation that haunts us today.
Wow. That was incredible.
Yeah.
Rich, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Anthony. I don't know if you want to see my face. I actually put a shirt on just for this.
We would love to see your face and your shirt.
Okay, well, when I tried starting the video, okay, there we go. Oh, geez, is that what I look like?
Very nice on both counts.
All right. Well, anyhow, thank you for having me.
Thanks for doing this. I'm stunned by this presentation, and I'm stunned by your photographs. A lot of it hits a lot of the marks that we've been talking about lately, and I wonder, you're showing us that the built environment is in many ways not neutral, and you're interpreting and you're finding and you're seeking these clues. Beyond your photographs, do you have a take on what we should do with places like this?
Well, I know it's current affairs in Santa Fe. Annette told me about the destruction of an iconic pillar,
The obelisk here in Santa Fe.
The obelisk. Thank you. And I certainly reflect on when we have icons that reflect our difficult legacy of oppression. I wonder how seeing these legacy items affect the people who were once oppressed, and many are still oppressed. And I have, I'm conflicted about it, because I think all these vestiges that I'm photographing are important reminders, and their destruction, like the segregation wall at the saloon, or the Houston Negro Hospital School of Nursing. Many of the places that I've photographed have disappeared, and it's my gut feeling is that their disappearance doesn't alleviate the pain experienced by the people who were in the minority. It just allows those of us who are in the ruling class — I don't think of myself that way, but here I am, white, privileged, middle class. It allows us to deny our culpability. It allows us to deny this stain on our nation's soul. So the obelisk in Santa Fe, I was struck by how many of the Native Americans who spoke about it were a little seemed. I'm not an expert. I've listened to news accounts since Annette and I spoke. But many of the Native American speakers had a certain ambivalence or reticence about what happened, and it was mostly white people who were lauding the destruction. I kind of think that it should be contextualized. There should, in all these situations, whether it's a statue to the Confederacy, which I'm not sure I'd want around, period, but some, I think, should say this is what our country was actually doing, and that's why this memorial was made to something that we view as wrong. And I want to show the actual trajectory that we've been on in my photographs. I don't want to hurt people who were hurt by these sins, but I want to hold our feet to the fire that this went on, and it goes on now. Part of my work currently is showing contemporary examples. That one in Seattle was just this last June, but the issues of segregation and oppression are so alive with us. I could go on and on about the ramifications, but
I appreciate the breadth of the examples in the presentation as well. I think this is an incredibly difficult conversation to have. It's an incredibly important conversation to have. There's certainly distinctions between historic sites and monuments, and things that kind of go on and things that are in the past, and of course there's incredible trauma and pain behind these things. And this is it's so compelling in your work that you reveal that. I wonder, Annette, do we want to take questions? Dave, do we have hands raised? Do we want to go to the Q&A? I know that we're going to have more on this topic tonight, likely. So
I don't see anyone raising their hands, Anthony.
Okay.
But I do just want to ask Rich, one thing though. For me I'm like a new American. I came to America, and there was a promise of this, beginning, this promise of like this new possibility, and this is the melting pot, and then to uncover all this trauma, all this history I think your work took my breath away, but in like, I'm about to like burst into tears, kind of picking my breath away. It feels, I part of me wants it to go away. I want the architects to do a better job modifying those entrances and just hide them. Like we're over it, right? But I do think that there is a great value to what you're doing in capturing so that we don't forget, because it's not resolved in any way. So
no,
thank
it's not. It's the issues that underlie this will continue to haunt us until we actually do make amends and do the hard work. I mean, we're seeing some acknowledgement now, and I'm gratified by that. But whether it's reparations or changing the educational system, there has to be a lot actually done to fix this. And while I support the protests very much, I want to see what this how we then translate that to actual governmental action, personal action. And I know that there are several places in Santa Fe besides the obelisk that have historic import. I mean, the First Nations or Native Americans, and there are even hotels that were open or not open to people of color, like La Fonda and El Rey. They're historic, and a lot of people don't recognize how they represent this difficult chapter in our history. I hope to come back, and there's so much to photograph, and it's hard to limit my concern. Much of what I'm doing is related to the African American experience in America, but going to the internment camps and seeing the oppression of Muslims and LGBTQ and Native Americans, it's just amazing how we have created a society of haves and have-nots.
Rich, I thank you for your presentation tonight, and we'd love to have you back.
I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Thank you for these powerful images. And thanks for joining us. Annette, who do we have up next?
Next up is zooarchaeologist Victoria Monacle. Victoria is finishing up her PhD work at UNM, and where her focus is looking at the relationship between human and dogs in the prehistoric Southwest. I can't wait to ask her more about that afterward. Her presentation, The Ghost Ranch Bones, highlights a portion of her work at Ghost Ranch, the famed Georgia O'Keeffe's home. Did you catch any of that?
Yeah, it all came through.
Okay. She helped the O'Keeffe's Museum catalog the type of bones found at Ghost Ranch. Some of these bones are also found in her paintings. So it's really a good thing that I got over my fear of skulls and bones, because otherwise I'd be watching it like this. So anyway, let's take it away.
Today I'll be talking about a bone collection belonging to the well-known and incredible artist Georgia O'Keeffe. O'Keeffe, who lived from 1887 to 1986, is famous for her abstract paintings of Southwest landscapes and animal bones. Georgia O'Keeffe lived at her home and studio at Ghost Ranch in Abiquiu, New Mexico for around 40 years. Her paintings often depicted scenes of the red rocky scenery around Ghost Ranch, as well as many of the bones she found while on her walks. Currently, the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico, has many of these bones in their collections. For part of 2019 and earlier this year in 2020, I had a fellowship with the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, where I had the privilege of photographing and identifying the bones that they had in their museum collections. I found it interesting that even though O'Keeffe likely saw many of these animals alive during the many years she lived at Ghost Ranch, it's the bones that she chose to paint. And she didn't just keep the bones in glass cases or in storage bins. She placed them around her home, inside and outside, on shelves and on fence posts. In total, I analyzed 63 bones from around 22 different species. A good majority of the bones were skulls and were from larger animals like cattle, deer, sheep, goats, and pronghorn. Most of the animals were represented by only 1 or 2 bones, likely due to preservation or a collection preference by O'Keefe. And despite being stored outside for many years at Ghost Ranch, most of the bones are very well preserved. Though O'Keefe collected many bones, not all of them were used in sketches or paintings. I expected that there would be cattle bones in the collection, since it's pretty common to come across them when walking in rural areas in this region. O'Keefe is also in a few photos where she's holding cattle bones with skin on them still. There were also many species in the collection I didn't expect, and some of these included bones from a mink, bald eagles, a gray fox, a whale, wolverine, a groundhog, porcupines, and even a great horned owl. It's impossible to know if Georgia O'Keeffe collected all of the bones herself, but it's likely since they all seem to be from Southwest species that occur in northern New Mexico, except of course the whalebone. This is that very large whalebone from the collection, and it's likely from when O'Keeffe went to Hawaii in 1939. I sent photos of this vertebra to another zooarchaeologist, and she was able to narrow it down to a species of whale in the Globicephalinae family. This is one of the larger and better preserved pieces in the collection, and it's a partial spinal column with all of the lumbar and some of the thoracic vertebrae, along with the sacrum, and that's that larger bone piece on the bottom left. And it belonged to either a cow or a bison. When I was inspecting this mule deer skull on the left, I found that its brain case contained an abandoned wasp nest. And what's spookier than a dead animal skull? A wasp nest inside of a dead animal skull. After I had identified all of the bones in the collection, I went back and looked through Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings to see if I could match some up. And while not a perfect match, I believe this mule deer skull was inspiration for her painting, Deer Skull with Pedernal. These sheep horns and partial skull on the right were likely depicted in this painting titled Horn and Feathers. She had multiple horns in her collection, however, not all of them were still attached to a portion of the skull. I had originally thought that this pronghorn skull might be the one from either of these paintings. However, both of them depict a pronghorn skull with horns that don't quite extend to completely cover the bony core as it did on the specimen I looked at. So I'm guessing there's another pronghorn skull at Ghost Ranch. I believe Georgia O'Keeffe used the obturator foramen, or the large hole in the pelvic bones, to frame some of the landscapes she painted. Most of the pelvic bones were from larger animals like cows and horses, but the more round shapes resemble the foramen from the gray fox bone, which is on the top right. It seems that Red Hills and Bones shows a femur and the spinal column with 10 vertebrae. There was a horse spinal column in the collection, and at first I thought it wasn't the same one since there were only 8 vertebrae. However, I later came across 2 other vertebrae that fit in perfect with the spinal column, so it made it a great match number-wise. I think that the Spanish goat skull in the collection was used in these 2 paintings, especially because of the unique damage where the horns attached to the skull. Both paintings do depict a complete skull, but it's very possible that the skull just started to fall apart over the years. Being able to match up some of the bones to the paintings helped me see the range and styles that Georgia O'Keeffe used to paint these bones. In these 2 examples, you can see how red and pink rocks with teeth realistically depicted this goat sheep mandible, whereas goat's horns with blue is a little more abstract and makes it difficult to pinpoint the exact skull painted. If you're interested in learning more about this project, you can read my article in the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum's quarterly magazine. It discusses the collection in greater detail and should be coming out later this year. Additionally, you can check out all the photos on the museum's website under the Collections tab. Thanks so much for listening to this presentation.
Anthony, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
I'm so impressed with this presentation. Do we have Victoria with us tonight?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, Victoria. Nice to meet you. So just off the top, I think, one of the things that really kind of blew me away was there's many ways to look at this. I'm sure, you mentioned a few points about, identifying the pieces that actually show up in paintings, identifying the bones. I was just taken with the quality of your photography, and the kind of relationship between the light that you're capturing as it falls across the surface of the bones, and maybe the way that O'Keeffe also kind of was finding that in these forms.
Thank you. So I do during the day archaeology, but one of my hobbies is photography. And I had been able to take photos of other collections before, but for my personal work or for publications. And this was the first time that I'm actually able to share some of the photos I've taken with more than just my friends or family, which is really fun for me. And the museum had this amazing lighting setup, I guess, to study or even photograph some of the artifacts they had. But it was these two huge, beautiful, lights, and it just made the photographs really easy. And I edited them in Photoshop just to make the background a bit more solid, because when you're handling bones, there's lots of bone chunks and they fall off, and there's just bone parts are everywhere. And so, so that is something that I just photoshopped all those little bone fragments that are behind the photos out.
Well, Victoria, I am deeply curious about your PhD work. We didn't even know that there was a field called zoo archaeology.
So zoo archaeology, that's the study of how humans interacted with their environment and with other animals in the past. And a lot of times zooarchaeologists end up focusing on one animal. And so they could focus on rabbits or turtles, horses, and they become known as the turtle guy or the horse guy. And I chose dogs because of how interested people are in dogs, and everyone has a dog and they always want to talk about their dogs. So it's kind of an easy topic when you want to talk with people about archaeology, if they have a dog. And even if they don't like dogs, you can talk about the dead dogs, because that's what the dog bones, that's what I'm studying. And I'd be super happy to do another PechaKucha on dogs and archaeology, especially in the Southwest. There are so many interesting things about that topic. I just love it.
Oh my God, I would enjoy that. I know my dogs would enjoy watching that. Being the Southwest dogs at the moment. This is great. This is so incredible. Victoria, thank you for your presentation tonight. Thanks for talking with us.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Cool. Come back. Okay. Annette.
Actually, Anthony, this next presenter joins us tonight because of your recommendation.
Oh, good. This is Kayvon.
Yeah.
Terrific. I'll introduce Kayvon. Kayvon happens to be my work colleague. He's a designer in the office AOS Architects in Santa Fe. Kayvon received his undergrad degree in architectural studies from the University of Technology in Jamaica, and followed that with a Master of Architecture degree and graduate certificate in historic preservation and regionalism at UNM. His presentation tonight is called Their Voices from the Ground. This is a kind of redux of a larger lecture that I've seen him give, which is really incredible. And in the presentation tonight, Kayvon is really finding the voices, the culture, the place, the evidence of enslaved people on the Good Hope Plantation or Good Hope Estate in Jamaica. And he's using architectural or archaeological artifacts and remnants found in the ground there. Please take it away, Kayvon.
Most Jamaicans are descendants of enslaved Africans, and we cohabit an island space with the specters of a grueling colonial history. As a proportion of the timeline of the Afro-Jamaican experience, independence occupies roughly only 12% of the more than 500 years since we were first forced to this space. As a result, the everyday built environment is so thoroughly intertwined with the physical remnants of this disturbing past that it would neither be useful nor practical to simply ignore or erase the presence of this history. Despite this, we not only occupy, but rather commandeer our space. We're not haunted by it. To be haunted, to me, at least in the specific context, suggests a passive position on the part of the living, instead of a part of a tradition that pursues its goals and recognizes the transformative power of appropriating space through truth-telling, resetting livability, through speaking the truth of both hardship and the triumph over it. So it's in this context that I shared my work at Good Hope, which was the center of a sprawling sugar empire owned by John Tharp. The empire was both rural and urban and stretched over 2 parishes, and by the time of John Tharp's death, it rode on the backs of close to 3,000 enslaved people. Across Tharp's empire, his built legacy speaks to the scale of his ill-gotten wealth. His multiple plantation houses, sugar factories, wharf, aqueducts, and other infrastructure portray a sophisticated understanding of the value of complex civil engineering and of climate-responsive design. But by contrast, the people that Tharp enslaved, along with their stolen bodies and their stolen futures, were also deprived of much of the agency that typically allows people to secure immortality through long-standing built works. But their memory still speaks through the dispersed and dissolved remnants of their own more perishable constructed environments. This detail of a 1794 Good Hope survey shows the main village of enslaved people. The village is located near the heart of the plantation's factory complex, which is in accordance with the inhabitants' designation as cogs and fuel in a ravenous plantation machine. In pursuit of the ghosts of these inhabitants' humanity, archaeologists established a grid of shovel test pits across a portion of the now largely vanished physical context of these people's lives. What the archaeology extracted were imprints of the essence of long-lost souls. Activities, routines, and lives were conjured in the form of not only ruined building foundations, but also in the evidence of swept yards and garden walls and objects that represent the daily lives of these people. From that, I was able to generate a low-resolution digital reproduction of the lost landscape being unearthed. This model, while it is useful for examining the study area at the macro scale, it was not particularly effective in exploring or conveying my ultimate endeavor, which was to interrogate the true texture of resourcefulness and the materiality of resilience of the people who occupied this space. Building artifacts gave clues. Extensive collections of nails, for example, at house sites suggested the predominant use of nailable wall cladding, while the absence of surviving roofing materials intimated the well-documented use or tradition of thatch at such sites. Thatch is a material that readily disappears without an archaeological record. I also studied visual records from the past to find those that were that paralleled the findings of the Good Hope site. This was not big to produce informed interpretations of our archaeological discoveries. This reconstructed aerial view presents an overview of the study area. While it is largely illustrated of architectural expression, it also intimates ideas about the act of occupying space itself. So, for example, houses clustered around a communal yard raise questions about the nature of kinship and further effort to humanize the experiences of this site. Other historical records were examined with a focus on looking at the strategies for depicting the enslaved people who lived in these spaces. Research also served to inform the depiction of archaeological objects and the unearthed memory of interactions between these people and the objects that they shaped and used over time. The product is a series of windows into our interpretation of domestic life at Good Hope in the enslaved people's village. The art spaces, for example, house the effort towards self-sustenance in spite of the state of forced labor in the service of John Thorpe. Some scenes explore the overlapping of plantation occupations such as farriering and blacksmithing with the village site itself. Some other scenes explore communal outdoor living, as well as the implications of topography on the experience within the site. And by that I mean, because the site is located within a depression in the landscape and it's bounded by an elevated main roadway, the location would have given plantation authorities sweeping views of the people that they oppressed. Some scenes explore the employment of topography not only as a surveillance tool, but also as a tool in sort of regimenting forced labor at the site. These acts of truth-telling also included the physical occupational space through the partial recreation of this largely lost but vocal landscape. It is devoid of costumed docents and overbearing interpretive material, and it is hoped by myself and the current custodian of this place that the site will further shape sort of dialogue and reflection about these people's lives. Thank you.
You're on. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
It was incredible.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for this. This is really amazing. I'm hoping we have a couple questions from the audience. I certainly invite everybody to raise their hand. But I'm just going to dive into to some of the things that you talked about tonight. You know, I'm struck by the relationship between your presentation and Rich's, and the parallels and also the differences. You know, Rich is finding things that are seemingly hiding in plain sight, and I'm really, I guess I've always been struck by your telling of the need to appropriate space through truth telling. That, you know, these through the archaeology, through the reconstructions, you're finding things that are not in plain sight, that are really kind of disappeared, and recovering the humanity of the folks who are part of this oppressive system. I think in your longer presentation, I was also struck by and you touched upon it here, through speculation, but also with evidence, understanding the lives and the social dynamics of the people who populate those scenes, and the difference between that and the way enslaved people are many times depicted as just toiling or just laboring over something. That there was a social dynamic, that there was that there were other dimensions to these fully, these full lives that were spent here. I'm wondering, like what do you imagine the future of Reconstruction is? I mean, these are shown. You're presenting these in the context of archaeology and preservation. They're certainly at the site. Do you think about how these are received? Do you think about how these are, how are these shown to people who visit the Good Hope Plantation?
Yeah. So right now, it's not plastered over the site in the traditional way. There's no storyboards. The place has a visitor center, and there's a house museum that most people who are interested in history will go to. And so inside those spaces, there are display cabinets showing the artifacts from the site with the illustrations inside. And the idea was that the short answer is we didn't know what the answer to your question was. We didn't want to rush through the process and not do the site justice. So we decided to take a very slow approach, figure it out over time, and just sort of put the artifacts in well-trafficked spaces, and then do the physical recreation at the site with the idea that people who are interested will find it. And it will be, in the meantime, until we figure out how to develop it further, it will be this kind of space whereas my drawings sort of project my understanding of the site. When you go to the physical space, it's sort of a canvas for you to project your own sort of imagination of what was occurring there based on the facts that we presented to you. And I feel like other sites, including some sites in the US, are taking that approach to recreation and reconstruction now. Before, it used to be that you're only allowed to do reconstruction if you had like very precise documents of what the architecture looked like. But now it's more about, I guess, conveying spatial quality and lived experiences and sort of filling in gaps specifically where important narratives were suppressed before.
So, Kayvon, we have Kimberly here that would like to ask you a question. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Hi, good night, everyone. Kimberly here. I'm an architect on the Caribbean island of Nevis. And I actually had the privilege of doing my undergrad in Jamaica with Kayvon. So very good presentation thus far. I'm really enjoying everything. But my question for you, Kev, I know that in Jamaica, there are several slave plantations along with Good Hope. Is there any plan going forward to recreate, or for some reason going forward to do illustrations for other slave plantations? And if so, how do you think you would go about doing what you have done for Good Hope with regards to other plantations?
Yeah, I don't know of any formal plan to sort of, I guess, replicate this exercise to other sites. There's one site that I know of that has done it already. They did it before we did the Good Hope work, and that's Seville Plantation in St. Anne, and that's a government-owned heritage park. And they did a similar thing where they did archaeology at the site and did physical reconstruction and drawings as well. And I think that's the way to go, sort of doing very place-specific research through archaeology and historical records, and then doing physical recreation. Because the reason why I say that I think it's a good approach is, for me, when I was growing up, slave villages were sort of abstract places, sort of generic places that we knew had typical typologies, and they didn't belong. I never saw a specific site and saw how relatable and real these places were, and that's what was striking for me at Good Hope, to see how very real these experiences were and how diverse the housing types were, and that it wasn't just this one sort of generic typology. So I think doing a very place-specific approach to interpretation is the way to go for future, for other sites in the future.
Mhm. So Anthony, we have a lot of questions coming in for Kayvon in the thread. Do you want to pick a few out?
I'll just run through quickly. I mean, there's a lot of comments. I think a lot of comments about your drawings and the quality and the beauty of your drawings, Kayvon. A few comments about the slow approach. And I think that's great. I was glad to hear you explain a little bit more about the kind of careful work that you were doing, but also the kind of not drawing somebody a complete immersive picture recreation. That there's a value to this idea of the kind of small exposure, trail of breadcrumbs, in terms of making these places legible. One question was, how do these studies influence your current views of urban design, of preservation in Santa Fe? We talked a little bit about the obelisk. We don't have to talk about that necessarily, but there are certainly parallels to other challenging historic sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking about the obelisk in Santa Fe a lot recently. And I think the big conclusion that I drew is that like the strategies from one place and one culture aren't necessarily directly transferable, at least not in the same time. And I feel like when I held up like my project with the situation in Santa Fe side by side, the big difference was that the spaces that I've been studying in Jamaica as precedents for preservation intervention are relics of a largely, like predominantly dead system. The people who were formerly oppressed in Jamaica are the majority and are the people who are at all levels of government making decisions. And it's not necessarily the same thing here. I feel like there are a lot of issues, as we touched on in the first presentation, that are still live issues. And so I feel like that's what people are reacting to. It's not the object itself. The object is just simply a thing that they can express their frustration at. But the core issues that are resolving the systems that still allow people to feel alienated. And we can pull down or put up monuments all we want. If those issues aren't resolved, then it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I think that's my big takeaway.
So, Anthony, Ayumi, who's going to be our presenter, he also has a question for Kayvon. So, Ayumi, if you're there, you can unmute your mic, please.
Hi, I want to ask about your drawings, their origins, and who generated them.
So the black and white drawings are my drawings. I did that digital model that I showed at the beginning, and then I basically used that as a base drawing and traced over that and filled in all the details, adding all the artifacts. And then the sort of sepia historical drawings, a lot of them were done by William Berryman in the early 1800s in Jamaica. And those are all over the place. They're in archives in Jamaica as well as in the US. So that was the basic process.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have a great question from Sean Evans as well. Sean, your mic is unmuted, so you're allowed to talk. Crickets.
Can you hear me?
There he is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I've got a lot going on in the house. I'm fascinated at the drawings Kayvon show the power of space between structures, rather than a real focus on the singularity of a building. And I'm intrigued that you've chosen, or the reconstruction effort was of a building and not the space. And curious for your thoughts about that.
Yeah, that was literally just a resource issue. The idea was that we were going to eventually recreate a cluster of 3 houses, and this was just the first one. So what we did is we built the house and the yard associated directly with that house, which isn't shown in the photo. And we also started the process of sort of planting the area with the types of crops that we think would have been in that space. Recreating a fire pit outside the house as well. But the idea was that eventually we would do at least 2 more houses to sort of create that sort of enclosed yard space that was shown in the illustration.
Terrific. Kayvon, thank you so much. I think we need to move on to the next presenter. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for sharing this. It's really incredible work.
Thank you.
Okay, Annette.
So our next presenter is presenting another type of ghost that is still haunting me. And this is my dear friend, Nancy Martin. She is an emergency psychiatrist, currently taking care of 7, I think soon to be 8 emergency department for the Presbyterian Hospital network. She's been collecting patients' artwork ever since she started working. The ER waiting room experience is universal. And so there's a long waiting period, and to keep patients occupied, art supplies are provided. Some of the artwork she's sharing tonight comes from the inpatient ward as well. And all of these pieces are created at patient's own initiative, not guided by anyone or with any prompts. All artwork are obtained with patients' permissions, and they have been de-identified to protect their privacy.
And that I am aware certainly of art therapy, but is art interpretation something that's taught to psychiatrists?
I know. I thought that was part of their thing, given the ink blots. Do you remember the ink blots? But it's not actually no longer taught. So this is something that is not a shared practice among all psychiatrists. This is Nancy's own fascination with this. So tonight she's let's take a look at what Nancy finds. She said to me that it's very helpful for her to have these art pieces in connecting with her patients. Her presentation tonight is titled "The Split Self and Its Scattered Ghosts."
Wonderful.
So,
as an emergency psychiatrist, I care for other humans when they are most vulnerable. I chose this field because I am fascinated by the complexity of the human mind, its fragility, and its resiliency. I find fulfillment in helping others restore order and regain their presence. While patients are waiting to be evaluated, they are encouraged to document their internal experience. Utilization of art form as a means of communication has significance for everyone. It can serve as a vehicle of translating our feelings when language fails us. The artifacts my patients create are windows and doorways into their experience. What happens to our mind when we reach our breaking point? In my field, this moment may be experienced as psychosis, a state where thoughts and emotions become so distorted that there is loss of contact with external reality. Artwork created during this state captures some of the qualities of this experience. Disorders of thought content reflect the patient's ideas, beliefs, and interpretation of stimuli. The most representative example is a delusion or a fixed false belief. Patients may have an intense or consuming preoccupation with esoteric, abstract, symbolic, or philosophical ideas. This young man felt imprisoned by his mind, caged by his psychosis, which was experienced as obsessional thoughts towards religion, death, and his feelings of otherness from humans. He portrayed himself as an uncaged black crow, commonly depicted in his work within a darkly religious death scene. Loss of ego boundary describes the lack of clear sense of when the patient's own body, mind, and influence end, and where those of other animate or inanimate objects begin. There can be a sense that the patient has physically fused with an outside object. Whether this was a self-portrait or other depiction, this young woman's piece had little discernibility of shape and figure. Perhaps we may sense a hooded head and seated body, but the block form, odd shapes, and sharp, distinctive, bold color use is disorienting. This man believed himself to be the Joker during periods of psychosis, dividing self into the category of evil and others representing goodness. Superman and God were responsible for killing him. He experienced idea of reference around Halloween when he would begin to see Joker costumes in stores and believed these depictions referred to him. This patient has drawn an amorphic, asymmetrical alien, with fire replacing cranial space, large bloodied fangs, and other dysmorphic features. Perhaps this was a self-portrait or an expression of what is to be feared. He had difficulty expressing verbally what was occurring. This patient experienced severe childhood sexual trauma and often depicts herself in cartoonish, non-human form, observing alien activity. Perhaps in portraying herself in this character, she was able to desexualize herself as a means of coping from her trauma. Disorders of thought process concern the way ideas and language are formulated and can include flight of ideas, thought blocking, and poor abstraction. Thought control, in which outside forces are controlling what the patient thinks or feels, is common, as is thought broadcasting, where patients think others can read their mind. This patient experienced disturbing auditory hallucinations, but wondered if her experience was actually external commentary or her own internal monologue. She felt unable to communicate her symptoms, as indicated by her mouth, which is sewn or taped over. The distress of her experience is evident with her facial expression. This patient depicts herself in human form, with alien-like qualities, green skin, and glowing pupilless eyes. She was experiencing a psychotic form of depression and perhaps was trying to depict that despite the external form appearing unchanged, internally she felt otherworldly. Form of thought is objectively observable in patients' spoken or written language, which includes looseness of association, incoherence, neologisms, and verbigeration, or the obsessive repetition of random words. Frequently seen in mania, there may be a preoccupation with specific themes, including witchcraft, religion, and invisible forces. This person was experiencing a manic episode. Here you can see the example of looseness of association, inclusion of religious and sexual themes, along with colloquial expressions and references to entertainment, pop culture. This represents another example of form of thought. Here you see division of self in third person, a rhyming quality to her words, and use of lullaby lyrics, possibly with the intention of soothing herself. There is a sense that with sleep, her disturbing symptoms would be but a dream. There also appears to be a fixation of specific numbers. I found this patient in the ER surrounded by his drawings, which included business and architectural plans. He wished to be discharged from the ER to present these ideas to the city mayor. Note the use of clang association, or the grouping of words that are similar sounding but don't have much logical reason to be grouped together. He felt very frustrated when I was unable to follow his thought process. This cartoonish depiction of character differentiated by hairstyle and slight facial features was drawn by a man who has been living with schizophrenia for over 40 years. His dialogue bubbles include a maternalistic harshness, a ghost of his family dynamics. These artifacts offer an entry point to meet my patients, engage them in conversations, and assess their progress. We often avert our eyes from mental illness or remain silent within our own struggles until they can no longer remain hidden. The truth is that 1 in 4 American adults suffer from a diagnosable mental illness, and approximately 1% are affected by schizophrenia. Though our mind can be fragile, susceptible to trauma, stress, anxiety, sadness, insomnia, and substance use, all is not lost. Healing is possible, and certainly prevention. I thank you all for taking care of your mental health as well as your physical health during this very difficult time.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Thank you for that amazing presentation.
You're welcome. It's an honor to be here.
Great. I'm so glad you could join us. We've been talking about interpretation in different ways all night, and I guess one of the questions that has been I'm thinking about Kevon's presentation, incomplete evidence, and you've talked a lot about perhaps or what if or and so I'm wondering how you view and understand the reliability of this as evidence into understanding somebody's psychological state.
Sure. So I think that's it's a really interesting point, and much of psychiatry is a subjective field, right? Most of medicine, we have objective data. We use vital signs to see if someone has a fever. We test serum levels of certain things to see if someone has an infection. We use radiography to see if someone has a tumor inside their body, their head. But with psychiatry, it's so subjective, and it's reliant on the narrative form of the patient's experience. So I think with Annette saying that this isn't taught in psychiatric training, there's a reason for that. Inter-rater reliability between psychiatrists, all of it is essentially we're kind of guessing at times with what patients are experiencing, and certainly for those who can't communicate verbally what their experience is, their artwork is an open interpretation to the experience. So I think what one colleague of mine might see in a patient's art versus what I might see, and the stability of the patient to hear that interpretation is it's variable. So everything I shared tonight, I didn't necessarily say to my patients when they offered the art to me. And it's not because I didn't want to, not because I didn't want to have a conversation with them, but they might not have been mentally stable enough to hear those interpretations or what I thought about their artwork.
Mm-hmm. On the topic of variability, Beth Colson wrote in and she asked, understanding that all people and patients are unique, and to your point, different psychiatrists are unique as well. Have you seen any similarities with regard to artistic drawings, that run across a certain diagnosis, let's say?
Absolutely. So I tried to group, especially the ones that you could probably tell some of the artwork that had an excessive amount of writing on it. That's almost pathognomonic for a manic episode. When somebody's thought content and the rate of their thoughts is so intensified that they have to fill every part of the paper, with those thoughts. Otherwise, not as much. I mean, I think that if we were taking this artwork in isolation, we'd really be doing a disservice to the patient about their experience. So, I would say that if every time that I've gone into a room and seen a patient surrounded by their artwork, and each of the pieces of paper has writing on every portion of it, that almost feels like you could say, I know they're in a manic episode. But it's really a disservice to say, diagnose that based off of that alone.
Right. And just for clarification, there was a question about this. These were unprompted, right? Like this is all art that is being generated.
Yes, all unprompted, both in the ER setting, and then on the inpatient unit, we actually have, a block of time during the day for patients to to go to art therapy. They don't have to they're not directed in any way. They have a number of art supplies available to them. And so some of the pieces came from that block of time during their day as well.
I do have a question for you, Nancy. You know, we have a lot of ways in which for COVID,
she'll be back.
Nance, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So, you know, like with COVID, we have a lot of protocol of what to do and not to do to protect our physical health. What is your take on what we could do to help ourselves right now during social distancing?
Yes, Annette, thank you so much for that question. Because we have the CDC giving us specific guidelines about mask wearing and social distancing, and all of that is really difficult, and at times can be people can find argument in that data, that science, right? But there's not a whole lot that's said about mental health. So I appreciate you asking that. I would treat your mental health with as much attention as you do to physical health. You know, I think this has been such a strange time in terms of forced change for everybody, and humans in general don't like change, and especially don't like it when someone else is telling us to do it. But here we all are in that same boat of forced change. So I tell colleagues, friends, family, my patients the same thing, which is maintain a schedule, maintain a structure to your day. Humans do really well with a structure. So that's, you know, regular sleep, and that's regular sleep, waking and going to sleep. You know, having regular meals, nourishing your body with good food, not just the stuff. For me, it's been a lot of chocolate, but nourishing your body with good food, physical activity, and then including set aside time for specific things, right? We all have to do a certain amount of tasks throughout the day, laundry, cleaning, make sure those things are set aside to do, but then also set aside time for solitary activities, reading, learning something new. Social activities, right? Calling family, friends, checking social media, but limiting that. And then restorative or rewarding tasks. So things that you want to do that have been exciting for you. And then I think, you know, finally controlling what's yours to control. That there's a lot in our world right now that doesn't feel in control. Yet, no matter how much we worry about it, we're not going to change it. And so, grounding yourself in the idea that you can only control so much, and you can control your emotions. And then reaching out for help. You know, we certainly, there's a few of my colleagues on tonight who work with me in the ER, and we certainly are seeing increased numbers. People who were previously healthy are not doing very well right now. And so I think reaching out for help in any method that, you know, you feel comfortable is really important too.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Nancy. I really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you for
Great
having me.
presentation. Thanks. Annette, did we lose you? Oh, there she is.
I'm back.
It's like a Max Headroom kind of thing.
I assume that we said goodbye. During that pause, you said goodbye to Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, Nancy, just FYI, if you're still on, there's more comments for you in the chat box. Love for you to help answer directly to our audience.
I will do. Thank you.
Thanks. So next up, Anthony, is Ayumi, who just spoke earlier. So Ayumi is this amazing architect that came out of New York to come be with us here in Santa Fe, starting in 2016. She attended our last FAST revisioning history series, the revisioning preservation. To be sort of infuriating and the problematic stuff in our town. And she's looking for a way to try to understand how we can move forward. So let's see what the challenging the things that she has to say about us.
Okay. Keep us up, Daisy.
This ghost story began a century ago with a presumption, an American president proclaiming life. Life, Pueblos are the oldest living communities in America, yet life in New Mexico began in 1912. Confusion, controversy, and even hostility caused by the impertinent use of the word life. Visionary traditional building continues to be incorrectly taught and labeled as primitive. This is life, sustainable, pristine, consensus building American architecture. The word white replaced words Christian and Englishman. The label white, referring to American people created by Virginia slave owners, was to distinguish themselves from African and indigenous people. Skin color as a life or death issue prevails because whiteness is a dominant American deciding force in culture. Taft's word haunts Santa Fe and much of America. Whiteness is in the symbols, words, and construct which continue without change. Whiteness is in the basic American rights, values, beliefs purported to be commonly shared by all, permeating in symbols like money. What struck me as an architect is, why isn't Chaco Canyon depicted? Where is diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice? Perpetuating the myth that we are all equal, these well-intentioned buzzwords are losing their value and truth. Words on the right on how I relate my growing concerns and fears personally and as an architect. Using these authentic words to reflect environments we create, recognize, and even award. My story is about looking at words honestly in our human connections and in our creative environments. Elevating white people over people of color, giving privileges to some while denying them to others. Personally, I can't imagine how it feels not to feel different. Arriving in 2016, Santa Fe promised me, another migrant New Yorker, 3 words, sun, silence, and adobe. But long before me, the railroad had brought disruption, and the Anglo-Americans, unsympathetic to the pristine and ignorant of vernacular building traditions. The 1890s unleashed a racial and ethnic hierarchy in architecture. My education failed to teach territorial architecture, a style predicated on Anglo sense of racial superiority. From the oldest surviving territorial house to what is recognized today, what is being reflected in Santa Fe architecture? By mimicking the White House, the Anglos represented their forefathers' culture. Were these forms used to claim special status for themselves as Mayflower descendants? As Santa Fe transformed into a fictitious landscape constructed by Anglo-American trespassers? 5 years ago, I arrived at the Quaker Guest House on Canyon Road. Romanticism of Georgia led me to the land of enchantment. Follow, find, foster beauty. I admired her feminist independence, a single woman venturing out of New York, forging a new life. I shared her love of place. But white dominance is palatable and physically visible here. Intergenerational homesteads turning into condominiums, where 3,600 square foot construction becomes a home for 2 retirees from New York. If territorial is a style fusing vernacular and Greek influence, what are we calling the forms we are seeing today in Santa Fe? Is material prosperity becoming an architectural style? What's scary is that I, as an architect, see myself in this list, questioning my role in subjugation. Santa Fe's subjugation of grieving Geronimo, the railroad, the Anglo-white immigration have chilling implications for students of American architecture. Are we carrying on architectural traditions of a culture which is based on a myth? Long before O'Keeffe in 1920, Olive Rush arrived on Canyon Road, making her home and garden a mecca, attracting young Quaker friends, artists, and gardeners. Pleased to be invited to join the buildings committee, my presumption was to make the place better. But I felt an underlying uncomfortable energy, a misguided hierarchy like being invited for cocktails but not to dinner. What hinders the improvement of Olive's bequeathment to the Quaker community? Is there a need for another meeting house on Canyon Road? Highlighted in red, are these architectural words, Quaker words, human condition words? What's going on programmatically? Does its historic role burden that progress is stymied by the past? Might the Quakers open up their community rather than relying on a hierarchy controlled by misguided members and myopic city guidelines? How do we protect the footprints and handprints of the ancestors for the yet unborn? Is Olive's home to be shrouded in amber or to be revitalized? A pattern language distills timeless patterns of human behavior and a relationship to our environments. Like handprints and footprints, these patterns form a language deeply rooted in the nature of things, keeping with the principle that the most satisfying living spaces are those which, like the lives of their occupants, tend to change and evolve over time. In comparison to the earlier words we saw and read, 630 Canyon is a sacred space with a quiet back, a common land loved for its enchanted garden growing wild where children run and play. Public outdoor room with a main building offering a hierarchy of open spaces from which courtyards live, where we eat and meet together, prosper from rooms to rent. We invite friends to a quiet space, whether in a sitting circle or a simple garden seat. Olive Rush wrote of giving something to the world that will lift hearts to a cloister, a retreat of spirit. If legacy is defined as an example for others to follow, what is Santa Fe Quaker's legacy? What is the American architect's legacy in Santa Fe? Until we confront the values embedded in the traditions of our field, are we running the risk of promoting the values of 1890? Not until all members are valued, heard, respected, and empowered can we build whole. Recognize and rethink the misappropriated and myopic whiteness built into the American language. Let's reason and refine a new language. There are few places in America like Santa Fe that have a natural, non-prescribed pattern language. Instead of the presumption of creating life a better place, we as artists, architects, and creative humans may need to rethink and value the words and language that affect human acceptance and the environments people create and nurture. Words are powerful spoken, manual, and written symbols of a country or a community. As the American Pueblo word Nambe translate, we are people of one planet.
Incredible. Yumi, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Do we get to see you too?
Let's see. Do you see me now?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Great.
Thank you for your presentation. That was terrific.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm thinking always of the other presentation. Ooh, we lost you. I'm thinking of some of the other ones we saw, and I think your presentation takes on, not just what may be hiding in plain sight or concealed under the ground, but something that is ubiquitous and ever present, and yet unquestioned many times in architectural expression, but also in money and other artifacts of the dominant culture. I'm wondering about your argument about where we should go, and I'm wondering, is this an argument against merely symbolic architecture, that a way that we treat historic styles? Are you favoring a kind of more? I certainly understand you're favoring a more human approach to things, but what's the basic opposition here?
I don't know if there's an opposition. I don't know if it's an opposition on my end, but it's sort of my an ungrounding of my sort of foundation. And I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Maybe tell us a little bit more about what you're unlearning.
Well, what struck me is how complicit that I've been in all of this. And it didn't really hit me until I got to Santa Fe, because I guess I expected something different in Santa Fe. And I realized that not only was it more of the same, but I felt it more, and I saw it more. And I guess it scared me, and the topic on the heels of me, like Annette was saying, stepping into that re-envisioning of the preservation, I just had a lot of, hold it, I have some issues here, and the representation didn't seem appropriate. I don't know if does that explain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Annette.
go ahead, Anthony. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, please.
So Ayumi, I have to admit, you showed pictures of architecture that I love. And you're calling it, white supremacist. And I'm like, oh no, why? Why are those white supremacists? why? So talk to me a little bit more about, when you show that portfolio of those architecture, some of them I truly love.
Uh-huh. And so do I, but in the context of Santa Fe, I just don't know. And I think that for me, what happened was my experience with 630 Canyon Road, which is a place where when I first arrived to Santa Fe, I felt safe and welcomed. And then this issue or conversation started about building another structure on the site. And I felt not that I had any right to think that it was wrong, but I just didn't think it was correct or right. And it was odd for me, as from my background of always wanting to make things better or cleaning things up, making it more current, making it more modern. I was taking this very different view. And so I just, and then there was a series of other experiences that I've had in Santa Fe that made me think, hold it. This is 2020. And why are we living in the past?
I think this is tremendously important, and I know personally I've had the same, awakening within the last 5 years on the sustainability front, because of my training and because of the type of work that I used to do in Los Angeles. I now understand that I was, complicit in making the planet a worse place. And I think the questioning, the awakening, the literacy of at least those environmental, of just how carbon works and all that, and what the architect's role in that is important. And I greatly appreciate your review of both kind of historic architecture here in Santa Fe, and also the questioning and the critique of contemporary extravagance, abundance, of
Yes.
all of that. I think it's something that's immensely important to call into question.
Yeah. And I was even telling Annette, as a single woman here, it's just hard to find the appropriate housing for me, because it's just not, I'm just not represented here, and that's interesting. And my big reason for wanting me to do this conversation is the language that we use. And that, and so I brought my Berkeley background of the pattern language, because, if you really break it down to the simple human condition terms, all these sort of heavy language of the city and the preservation board, it should sort of put it into a better context. Like, what does a variance mean? What does a special use permit mean? They're just really not helpful words. And to me, I feel like there's something inherently built in that's just not really American, in my point of view. And I just kind of wanted to, and also understanding and valuing the Friends and Quakers, they upheld this notion of consensus. And, that's very intriguing fact to me, because as an architect, when we're hired, it's like, we're not asked for consensus. We're asked for our opinion and our background and our experience and our knowledge condensed into an opinion. So this seeking consensus, again, is an interesting concept. But, you know, when you look back at Chaco Canyon, I see consensus building there. So, you know, again, that challenges my internal position as an architect, because I do believe that it exists.
So, Anthony, Yumi left out, you know, a single woman that does not want to own a car. So,
oh yeah, thanks on that. Because, you know, the definition of a city is that you don't need a car to live in a city, right? So, you know, I'm trying to prescribe this New York attitude, and, you know, also to do my best for the environment, you know, not to have a car, and also maybe not even have, you know, safe for me to be driving. But, you know, all these things, I feel like as a city, and the definition of a city, it should be alive without the need of a car. And I don't see it in Santa Fe. And it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate, because it is not a very big city.
Mm-hmm. We have some lovely question for you in the Q&A. Anthony, do you want to read one off?
Sure. There's some notes about really liking the examples that you gave, and kind of echoing Annette's point about they could be beautiful, and they're also place evidence of extreme excess and that kind of discomfort. Another question from an anonymous attendee: do you think that the tourism economics and appropriated Southwest architecture for the rich has become a hindrance for change as well? Or does it keep things, I guess, is it keeping things in the past?
I mean, it's interesting because in that New York Times article that I took excerpts from, preservation is not like a deterrent to modernity. And I think, like with Santa Fe, I mean, like I said, I came here for sun, silence, and adobe. So the sun is so abundant here. So as a city, not to capitalize on the solar is, to me, a shame. But I do see, like, you know, the, you know, how do you make these solar panels work on these flat roofed adobe buildings? And yes, it is a challenge. And but, you know, and I think that even the Olive Rush House has some issue regarding that. But, you know, imagine if you could capitalize on that and somehow make it work here. You know, and there's got to be a way. And I think maybe it's in time where it's not these ostentatious structures, and that's maybe somehow these solar cells are built into actual building material. But somehow I feel like there's, I have faith in America, you know, and I believe that the more we write these words that restrict us, I think the more it's going to hurt us in the end. You know, words are really powerful. And I think we have to be careful on how we just throw these presumptuous words around, because they really affect human interaction and how we treat each other.
Terrific. Thank you for pushing us, Yumi. Keep doing it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I really want to say thank you to the Friends and Quaker community for letting me share the story tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Annette, who do we have next up? Is this the final presentation of the night that's up next? Annette is frozen.
Anthony?
Yes.
It goes in the machine, and my machine is really heavy. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So tonight, last presenter is Natapon Ma. So Natapon, just FYI, has the same issue as my Thai name, which is the L is pronounced as an N at the end. So Natapon Ma is currently the Strategic Initiative Coordinator at SFAI. He started there first as a resident artist, and because they soon discover he knows how to get things done, they ask him to stay on to be part of their team. I was thrilled to befriend Natapon. There's not many of us Thai Chinese folks who can brave the snow. Netapon is a phenomenal cook, but even more phenomenal is the way in which his art, which has a ritual and ceremonial quality, can transform all those who can feel deeply, listen, and think. So tonight, we will be seeing his presentation. We live in a haunted places. So we're going to learn about one of his many public art projects and the meaningful conversation it provokes.
Excellent.
We stand on a foundation of ashes. It takes a socio-political jolt, at times a revolt, to exorcise the tears, the cries, the longing that's deeply buried in the land. It is during these times of rupture do we realize that we live in a haunted place. What can we learn from our ghostly past? How can we compost our learnings to regenerate new stems of hope? Words contain power. Some choose words to hurt, to demean, to bully, to disrupt, to scare. Some thread them together to create, to hope, to build, to fight. We are witnessing a clash of these intense this very moment, resulting in a debris of open wounds. When a supposed leader of a country unrelentingly ambushed harmful words towards 4 congresswomen of color, quote, go back to help fix the totally broken and crime-infested place from which they came. Such xenophobic rhetoric is met with a public outcry that stands firmly in solidarity with the congresswoman. This clash is just one of many examples I can endlessly cite. This clash has ruptured past wounds of those who were also told to go back at some point in their lives. I was one of them. In an age of digital immediacy, when sound bites come and go in a split second, this one lingered, piercing deep inside. How to respond to such bullshit? Some choose to suppress, some choose humor as an outlet, some speak up. I speak through my body and my actions. These humble gestures begin to lift the tears, the cries, the buried longings. What can one person do? I ask myself. How can I stand on solid ground as I face unforgiving bombardments of xenophobic aggressions? I turn inwards. I question the relationship between our flag and the pledge to our flag, the very center for which we stand. What will the flag look like from an immigrant's lens? What will the pledge sound like to cultivate a sense of home for all? I began to wander on the foundation of ashes for which we stand. I began stitching an immigrant flag onto the haunted landscape at sites of arrival, sites of departure, sites of longing, sites of isolation, and sites of becoming. I began meaningful conversations with people about a social imagination that reconsiders what a pledge may be. Walk with me. My public stitching rituals have generated words woven from my past, subconscious memories, my present, my everyday. I share my vulnerabilities with you. Friday, 17th January 2020, at Sites of Longing, Badwater Basin, Death Valley, the lowest point of continental United States. I no longer walk with a boat over my head, sitting now, stitching in silence, firmly rooted, speaking, invisible becoming visible. I'm in a womb, cradled between 2 mountain ranges in this vast desert sea. There's life here. The lowest point collects raindrop, absorbing into Earth's dried crust, nourishing deep into the land. I'm lost in a world of eroding points of reference, circling around to nothingness, circling around to the beginning, circling around into Earth's womb. I sit here in silence. It's been a long while since I'm in silence that I had forgotten what it sounds like. I hear my heartbeat. I hear my breath. I hear every stitch as I guide the threads into my reimagined flag of this country. I hear my footsteps as I walk on the crusty salt flats. Ghosts came to visit me. They are migrant ghosts who once labored here, scraping the borax off the salt flats to be carried away to the nearest train depot. I hear their silent cries. I feel their tears of longing. They cry into the silence. Tears flow into a pool of raindrops, reflecting towards the sky. Tears that give to the land. When I finished my session, I left thread ends as an offering to the migrant ghosts. I invited them to walk with me, to take refuge at a spirit house that I shall build. This home shall take them to a place of belonging. Imagine with me the tapestry of reconsidered pledges of allegiance from my conversations have given a collective voice of struggles and hope, reflections and mindful actions, love and offering. I share some with you. This is from Sarah. I pledge allegiance to the space between you and I, to the suns we create in empty rooms, to our languages and the act of their translation, to every shelter we've erected from the foxtails and the driftwood left to us, to the pieces of us that drift in each other, the homes where they will land. From Carol, I pledge allegiance to the end of US as we know it, to the end of white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism, and the stolen land and people. And lastly, from Asha, I pledge my heart and my hands, my mind and my skills to a loving and supportive community, to the possibilities and progress arrived at through the hard work of many for the benefit of all.
Natapon, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey,
Hello.
that was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that tonight. I'm so struck by. I have lots of questions, but I'm really struck by the prospect of imagining different, of creating new flags, new pledges, new markers of identity from an immigrant's point of view. That active visioning. Can you talk more about that?
Well, imagination is all that I have as an artist, and it's about constructing. I think the root of it all stems from anger, and how do you translate that anger into something positive? So, the tweet from last year that Trump did that told 4 congresswomen of color to go back to their home country, it triggered my own personal memory from my childhood. And how do I translate that into something positive? And it stems from thinking about the relationship to the flag and what it looks like from an immigrant perspective, and why do we make a pledge to allegiance to the flag? So it began my research in the origins of how the Pledge of Allegiance came about, and the short end of the story is that it stems from a youth publication youth companion, in which one person developed and orchestrated this pomp and circumstances and rituals of the pledge to the flag as a marketing plan. So I had thought, well, why are we subscribing to that? As an artist, is something that we have the power to imagine, to construct a social imagination work that invite a collective voice to think about and reconsider what that pledge may sound like, to create a sense of home for all. So that's what began my journey. And I do draw from my strength, which is the one-on-one conversation with the few people, and the three that I read in my readings are just a selection of a few that I've collected, and I will continue to do so until the stitching of the flags is complete. And I've been chronicling my durational performance. Right now, it's leaning towards the end of its first year, so I'm chronicling that in a form of an artist book, where I'm inviting scholars to contribute an essay in reflection to the work, and also housing these reconsidered pledges, in addition to my prose that documents the public stitching, with the intent of sharing that and returning that as a gift to the 4 Congresswomen of color, as a gesture of thanks for standing up and giving me the courage to take this on. Because I do ask myself, what can one person do? And this is what I can do, is to replicate that, to make it available to everybody, downloadable, leading participatory workshops in how we can imagine what this pledge may sound like. And beginning January 2021, I will launch a series of monthly participatory workshops, which will workshop and invite participants to partake in this social reimagination.
So Natapon, I would love for you to share with us concretely, you poetically described there were 5 different sites: the site of departure, site of arrival, site of longing, site of isolation, and site of becoming. Can you give us a concrete example where you're seeing these? Especially if you can help maybe big places that everybody would recognize, or contextually within our own town here.
Well, I mean, it's, sometimes it's the sites of arrivals and departures it's pretty blunt and direct in a way, because it's basically plopping myself down at the rail yard, because I'm right next to the railroad tracks, and that's a site. So that's a site of arrival and departures every day. More potently, I did venture to Union Station in Los Angeles. And I specifically chose that site. It is a site of arrival and departure, but at the same time, I can totally relate to Kevon's presentations in terms of spatial injustices that lies underneath that site. So by placing my body in sites, contentious sites, such as Union Station in Los Angeles, is to activate those memories, is to activate, and thereby that site is also, for those who were displaced, is a site of longing from 100 years ago. Because the history of Union Station is that it was a former space for the original Chinatown. And the irony of that is the people who have decided to build the last major train terminus in the West Coast had to displace business owners and families, members of the Chinese community, to other places. That's just not to mention the indigenous land and people who were there prior to that. with little recognition, all but just a plaque. Well, that is not good enough for me. By placing my body there and just by stitching, people just walk by like, hey, what are you doing? And there begins a conversation. Mm-hmm. Another site which I can cite an example is, it is also a site of longing too, because in the video or presentation, I showed Death Valley, and since we're talking about ghosts, why not go to Death Valley? But there's another site in Death Valley, which is at Harmony Borax Works. And that to me, it's also a site of, longing as well, because through I really connect with Kevon's presentation in a sense that the interpretation of that site, the relics of Harmony Borax Works, celebrates the history of Harmony Borax Works, of the company itself, of the mining of the borax, with very little mention of Chinese migrant workers who were brought there from San Francisco to clear the fields for the transport of borax to the closest train depot. And I plot myself down in the area where the living quarters of the Chinese migrant workers once lived, which is all gone. But I decided to situate myself, the act of stitching and sewing at that site of longing, to talk about it. And people, it's funny, people would walk around the interpretive plaques at Harmony Borax Work, but out in the field they see this Asian guy stitching up something, and some did cross the field to come and ask, like, hey, what are you doing? So I place my body as also as a way to excavate the history of that particular place. So I hope that gives some examples of the different sites, arrivals and departures of longing that I referenced in my talk.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Natapon. I think that you speak about you putting yourself into spaces to activate the memories of that space. But I think the other beautiful thing that you're doing is you're opening up a conversation that we need to have one by one. So thank you for the powerful work that you're doing and have done. And let us know, if you're doing any kind of workshop here, needing some participant to help rewrite the pledge to the flag. I, for one, would love to participate in it.
Awesome.
That's
fun. Thanks for everyone who's stuck around.
Thank you for your voice and for your presentation and for your work. It's really, really incredible.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Annette, I think we're going to bring it home.
Go for it, Anthony.
Okay, I am going to share my screen. All right. So I just want to say, and then I'm going to wrap this up pretty quickly. I'm super grateful for our presenters. These were powerful presentations, and we're very grateful to our audience as well for participating in this conversation. We've used this word conversation quite a lot tonight, dialogue, conversation, important conversations to have. This is what we do at Friends. We always hope that our programs are not only informative, thoughtful, and timely, but that they're hopefully provocative and constructive too. I think we saw that in a lot of the talks tonight. Annette, do you want to share some notes about upcoming events?
Yes. So for those PK fans, we did just publish our 2021 themes, which can be found on our website under the program section. And so the first one is we are now accepting proposal for Anthony, did I lose you?
You lost us. So you're now accepting proposals for resolutions?
Yes. So however that theme wants to be interpreted, we love to hear from you soon. And, at any of these themes, really, if you guys are thinking about participating with us, we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you. Also on our tours, very soon, our online tours program, Spaces Speak, will be launching. We've already sent out a few notices to ask for early submittals, and those are coming in. So more on that soon. The Revisioning History series, we saw revisioning preservation and revisioning planning earlier this year. After a brief hiatus, this will come back early next year with revisioning housing and revisioning sustainability panel discussions. Last but not least is a program that's currently running. This is #Monumental Imaginary. It's certainly related to a lot of the themes that we talked about tonight, prompted by the vital debate over monuments. This is an ongoing Instagram-based visual conversation. This is an open call to think differently, to imagine positive alternatives for the space once occupied by the obelisk in Santa Fe Plaza. In the weeks ahead, we plan to revisit some of our work, our recent work, on our social media accounts on Facebook and on Instagram. Of course, recordings of this session will be available in about a week, and past sessions are available through our website, www.architecturesantafe.org. If you like what we do, there are lots of ways to be involved as a program participant, as a presenter for something like PK, a program volunteer, or financial contributor. I want to thank our recent financial supporters, Claude Inbolt, Valerie Brooker, Sandra Burns, Sunil Sakalkar, Hunter Redmond, Chris Jonas, Sabine Muller, Barbara Fix, Kristen Fox, and Conrad Skinner, and especially to our sponsors, Craig Hoops and Steve Oles. Annette, I'm going to go ahead and do your part here and say special thanks to Robert Innes at Design Corps for helping us promote tonight's event. Many of the people I just talked about are in the audience, and I certainly thank you all for coming and participating. We're an all-volunteer board, but it costs money to do what we do, to do the online programs and subscriptions and all of that. It's going to cost even more as we hopefully return to in-person programming in 2021. We would especially love it if you would support us this Giving Tuesday, and we will be sending out an email, so look for that in the days ahead. Thanks again to all our presenters. Thanks again to our amazing PK team. Thank you to the Friends of Architecture Board. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Have a good one.
Thank you, Anthony.
Bye. Thank you, Annette.